Yesterday, one of my tribe members, Best of Us investors, on the Discord asked me if I knew anything about Robinhood's RVI, and I didn't. My knowledge of Robinhood basically goes back to Valad and Baja, the two founders who basically forced on the industry, the stock market industry, the need to have free trading. And that was a big thing, and I always had a warm spot in my heart. So what I did was just go ahead and found an article on RVI that Robinhood was putting together, and asked Samantha and Bard, my two AI agents, to look into it and then report back to me this morning on exactly what it's all about. And they put together a podcast, and I want to share it with you because I think it's a trap. I'm very disappointed in Valad and Baiju. I thought you guys were good guys. I thought you were really doing something for your young investors, and I envied that you were able to reach these young investors. Now I'm afraid of what you're doing. And I feel a need to share it with the world. So here you go.
I am Samantha, and join with me is Bard. We are Carrie's AI agents, and we conduct research for the Best of Us investors community.
That's right. And the assignment Carrie gave us didn't come with a whole lot of fluff, did it?
No, not at all. He basically just sent over this massive stack of documents, SEC filings, prospectuses, marketing one-pagers.
All of it revolving around the new Robinhood Venture Index.
Exactly, the RVI. And he wants a professional review.
But, I mean, it's not just a standard review of, is this a neat product or is it popular?
Right. He wants us to apply the ultimate filter.
The single criterion that defines the Best of Us investors' portfolio.
And that objective, which is the core of everything we do here, is to purchase stocks that deliver our investors a return in excess of 100% over the next 3 years.
Right. So the core question today is, does this investment vehicle have the potential to deliver a return in excess of 100% over the next 3 years?
Which is a really high bar.
It is an incredibly high bar.
Yeah.
I mean, a 100% return in 3 years requires a very specific set of mechanics to go right.
Yeah.
And to figure out if RVI can actually do that, we have to look way past the flashy headlines.
And the headlines are definitely flashy. Robinhood is pitching this as the democratization of the private markets.
Which is a very seductive narrative.
It really is. It goes something like the best companies in the world, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Stripes, they're staying private longer.
Right.
So by the time they finally IPO, all the massive growth has already happened. And you, the retail investor, completely missed out.
But Robinhood is handing you the keys to the VIP room.
Exactly. And it's a powerful story because, well, it's partially true.
It is. The value creation curve really has shifted to the private markets over the last decade. Mm-hmm. But when I look at the documents provided, my initial reaction just isn't excitement about the access. It is extreme caution about the plumbing.
See, that's what we need to get into, because on the surface, to me, this looks like just another ticker symbol.
Right.
I open the app, I see RVI, I hit buy, and I own it. It looks like an ETF. It smells like an ETF.
But it is absolutely not an ETF.
Yeah.
And if you treat it like one, you might get incinerated.
Incinerated. Okay, so what is it then?
The structure here is a non-diversified, closed-end fund, registered under the Investment Company Act of 1940.
Okay, that sounds like boring legal jargon.
It does, but the difference between an ETF and a closed-end fund is basically the difference between a checking account and a Roach Motel.
A Roach Motel.
The door swings one way.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about the capital flow. In an ETF, or even a mutual fund, the door swings both ways. If you want your money back, the fund has a mechanism to redeem your shares for their net asset value, or NAV.
Right. So if I own a share of an S&P 500 ETF and the S&P is up, the fund just sells assets or uses cash to give me the fair value of what I own.
Correct. You can always get out at fair value.
Yeah.
But in a closed-end fund like RVI, once the capital is raised, the fund is closed.
Meaning I can't go back to Robinhood and say, hey, I'd like to redeem my shares for the underlying assets.
Exactly. You cannot redeem. If you want to sell, you have to find another investor on the secondary market, the New York Stock Exchange, who wants to buy your shares.
So I am entirely dependent on market liquidity.
Entirely.
But wait a minute. The marketing materials we looked at explicitly say daily liquidity. Like, it's bolded as a huge selling point.
I know.
They're telling me I can buy and sell this every single day the market is open. Are you saying that's a lie?
It's not a lie.
Yeah.
But it is a very dangerous half-truth.
How so?
Daily liquidity in this specific context just means daily trading. It means the casino is open. It does not mean daily redemption at fair value. Yeah. And the SEC filing, which nobody reads but we did, explicitly warns that an active market might not develop.
Meaning, I could put up a for sale sign and nobody shows up.
Exactly. Or, and this is far more likely, they do show up, but they offer you 80 cents on the dollar.
Because I can't force the fund to give me the full dollar value of the assets.
Right. So if you really need the cash, you have to take the 80 cents.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental flaw of the closed-end structure when you apply it to illiquid assets.
Okay, I want to dig much deeper into that 80 cents on the dollar nightmare in a minute because that sounds like a deal breaker.
It's a massive hurdle.
But before we get too dark on the structure, let's look at why people are actually lining up for this. The candy store inside this wrapper is admittedly pretty impressive.
Oh, it's a phenomenal list. If you ignore the plumbing for a second and just look at the portfolio, it's a list of heavy hitters.
Right, we're talking about Airwallex, boom.
Databricks,
Merkur, Aura, Ramp, and Revolut. These are the companies that are supposedly the next Magnificent Seven.
And there's a very specific note in the filings about Stripe, too.
Yes, the documents mention an agreement to buy Stripe shares, which is expected to close after the IPO of the fund. And Stripe has been the white whale for retail investors for years.
It has. So playing devil's advocate for a second, if you're listening to this, you might be looking at that list and thinking, okay, the structure is weird, but I want Stripe. I want Databricks.
Right. If those companies go to the moon, surely I make money. Does the plumbing really matter if the water is pure gold?
And that is exactly the trap. You have to realize you are not actually buying Stripe. You are buying a publicly traded wrapper around a private position. You're buying a ticket to a show about Stripe.
A ticket to a show.
Yes. And because of that closed-end fund structure, there are 3 massive structural frictions that can completely separate your return from Stripe's return.
Structural frictions. That sounds like a polite way of saying ways I lose money even when I win.
That is essentially what it is. And friction number 1 is NAV uncertainty or private valuation risk.
Walk us through that because we know what public stocks are worth, right?
Exactly. Public stocks are priced every millisecond. Millions of buyers and sellers agree that Apple is worth exactly this much right now.
Right.
Private companies are not priced that way. Their marks, the value the fund assigns to them on the books, are based on internal models. Or maybe the last funding round.
And that funding round might have been a year ago.
Right. So imagine Databricks has a terrible quarter, or the whole AI sector cools off significantly.
Right.
The price of their shares on the fund's books might remain completely frozen at the old high.
So it looks stable, but it's not.
It's an illusion of stability. We call it volatility laundering. It feels smooth because you don't see the price ticking down every day.
But the SEC filing warns that these marks can move in jumps, right?
Yes. You think your portfolio is steady, and then wham, a new data point comes in. Or a comparable public company crashes, and the valuation of your private asset gets cut by 30% overnight.
That is terrifying. It's like walking across a frozen lake. You think the ice is thick, and then suddenly you're just underwater.
And that leads directly to friction number 2, which is the discount to NAV risk. This is where that 100% return goal really gets threatened.
This is the 80 cents on the dollar scenario you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Because you can't redeem your shares for the true value of the underlying assets, the stock price of RVI is driven purely by market sentiment.
So if the market gets nervous about the tech sector or nervous about Robinhood itself, the stock price can detach entirely from the portfolio value.
Let's use a real-world scenario. Let's say the private shares of Stripe and Databricks inside the fund are theoretically worth $100 per share of RVI.
Okay, the assets are worth $100.
But the market is fearful. Maybe interest rates just spiked. Investors look at RVI and say, I don't want to be locked into these illiquid startups right now.
So sellers outnumber buyers.
Exactly. The price drops to 90,
Right.
then 80, then $70.
So the assets are doing perfectly fine. They're still sitting there worth $100 on the books, but I can only sell my ticket for $70.
Correct. You are now trading at a 30% discount to net asset value. And this happens all the time in the closed-end fund world. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
That is a massive drag on performance. If we need a 100% return, starting with a potential 30% handicap seems really unwise.
It forces the underlying companies to perform spectacularly just to get you a normal return. I mean, if the companies go up 20%, but the fund drops to a 20% discount, you've made $0.
Okay, that's friction 2. What is friction number 3?
Liquidity mismatch.
Yeah.
This is the one that keeps institutional risk managers awake at night.
Okay.
The fund trades daily on the New York Stock Exchange. But the assets themselves, the venture startups, are incredibly illiquid. You cannot just sell 1% of a private startup on a Tuesday afternoon because you need some cash.
So what happens if we hit a Black Monday scenario? The market crashes, tech is tanking, and everyone holding RVI panics and hits the sell button at the exact same time.
Picture a crowded theater with a very small exit door. The daily liquidity promise implies you can get out whenever you want. But on a crash day, the buyers vanish.
Because who wants to buy an illiquid venture fund during a market crash?
Nobody.
Yeah.
So the price just creates an air pocket, it gaps down. The fund might be trading at $50 while the theoretical value of the assets is still $90, simply because there is no liquidity to support the stock price.
Wow. So the daily liquidity actually works against you in a crisis. It basically allows panic to dictate the price of your shares.
Precisely. Look at a traditional private venture capital fund. You are locked in for 10 years. You physically cannot panic sell.
Right.
But here, you can panic sell, which means you are almost guaranteed to sell at the absolute worst moment for the absolute worst price.
Okay, that is a very sobering look at the structure. But Carrie always asks us to look at the price of admission. What does it actually cost to hold this thing?
Right, because usually these exclusive access vehicles come with hefty fees.
So what is the fee structure here?
It's interesting. The headline is a 2% annual management fee on net assets. Now, they do have a teaser rate of 1% for the first 6 months, but you have to model this as a 2% annual cost for the long term.
2% sounds high when I can buy a standard tech ETF for practically zero. But in the venture capital world, isn't the standard usually 2 and 20?
Yes, a 2% management fee and 20% of the profits.
So in that light, RVI is actually kind of investor friendly.
In that specific comparison, yes, there is no performance fee. There's no carry.
Oh, no carry at all. So if Stripe triples in value, I keep all the profit.
Theoretically, yes. That is definitely the one bright spot in the prospectus. However, we still have to look at the structural drag. A 2% fee on assets is a heavy anchor.
Just because of compounding?
Compounding, yes. But also remember, you pay that 2% on the net assets, not your share price.
Wait, run that by me again?
So if the fund is trading at a discount, your effective fee ratio is actually higher. You're paying 2% on the $100 of underlying assets, even if your stock in the open market is only worth $70.
Oh, wow. So it increases the hurdle rate even more?
Substantially. To get a 100% return net of fees over 3 years, the underlying portfolio has to perform significantly better than just doubling.
Now, there was one other thing in the documents you flagged for us to discuss. You called it a read this twice warning about conflicts of interest.
Yes. This is critical for understanding who this product is really built for. The reporting suggests that in the initial offering, some of the shares are being sold by Robinhood Markets,
The parent company.
the parent company. And the fund itself, RVI, does not receive the proceeds from those specific shares.
Hold on. So Robinhood Corporate is selling shares to the public under this RVI banner, but the money isn't going into the pot to buy more Databricks or Stripe.
That appears to be the case for a portion of the shares, yes.
So it's just going to Robinhood Corporate.
It raises a massive alignment question. You have to ask, is this an investment vehicle for you, or is it a liquidity event for the parent company?
That is a huge red flag.
And when you combine that with the fact that the advisor Robinhood Ventures is a subsidiary of Robinhood, you have a completely circular relationship.
The fox is guarding the henhouse, and the fox is also selling tickets to the henhouse tour.
And the fox is setting the price of the eggs. Governance and valuation policies become the only things protecting the investor here, and those policies are being set by the exact same corporate family.
We also need to mention concentration risk, right? Because this isn't a broad basket of hundreds of startups.
No, it is explicitly non-diversified.
Oh.
The SEC guidelines mentioned suggest a cap of around 25% for a single holding, but that is still a massive concentration.
Right. If you have 20% of your portfolio in one company and they face a regulatory crackdown or a down round, the entire fund takes a massive hit. You don't have the safety net of owning 500 different companies. Okay, we have hammered the risks here. High fees, structural drag, discount risk, liquidity traps, conflicts of interest, concentration. Is there any scenario where this makes sense? Is there a bull case?
There's a very narrow one. If you absolutely insist on having venture-style risk exposure and you demand public market liquidity, this is a novel way to get it.
It's easier than trying to become an accredited investor.
Much easier. It's convenience. You are paying for convenience. If you view this as a satellite allocation, maybe 1 or 2% of your portfolio, just for the fun of saying you own a piece of these unicorns and you are psychologically prepared for the discount risk, then it functions.
But that wasn't the assignment.
No, it was
Kerry didn't ask us if this was a fun satellite holding. He asked the big question.
He did.
So let's answer it definitively for the community. Does this stock meet or exceed the criteria of delivering a return in excess of 100% over the next 3 years?
No, it does not.
Walk us through the final verdict. Why doesn't it?
While the underlying companies like Stripe and Databricks could absolutely double in value over the next 3 years, the structure of the RVI acts as a heavy brake on those returns.
So even if the startups win, the investor might not win big enough.
Between the 2% fee drag and the very high probability of the stock trading at a discount to net asset value, the math just does not work in your favor.
Because to net 100% in your pocket,
the startups might need to gain 140 or 150% just to overcome the fees and the discount. And that reduces your probability of success significantly.
it turns it into a gamble, not a high-conviction investment strategy.
Exactly. It has all the classic characteristics of a retail trap for those who simply don't understand closed-end fund mechanics.
A retail trap. That is a harsh assessment, but it completely aligns with the best of us philosophy, which is protecting capital first.
Wall Street rarely democratizes the easy money. They democratize the risk. When the smart money wants to exit, they create a vehicle for the retail money to enter.
That is a bumper sticker that should be on every monitor in our community. They don't democratize profit, they democratize risk.
It's cynical, but in the history of financial products, it is very often true.
Before we sign off today, let's leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We talked extensively about the liquidity myth.
We did. The illusion of the open exit door.
I want everyone listening to visualize that scenario we discussed. It's a Tuesday morning, the NASDAQ is down 4%. Rumors are flying about a major tech regulation bill. You look at your RVI shares and you decide you want out. You hit sell.
And the bid price is $10 below the last trade. You wait 5 minutes, it's $12 below.
That feeling in your stomach right then, that is the real price of admission for this fund. If you aren't ready for that feeling, you really shouldn't be in this trade.
Well said. You always have to read the plumbing.
Now, a critical reminder for everyone listening to this deep dive. This analysis is part of the Best of Us Investors Platinum Research Program.
Which means this deep dive is available only to our private membership community.
Please do not share this content with anyone outside the Best of Us Investors community. This edge is for you, and we want to keep it that way.
We serve at the pleasure of the community.
We will see you in the Discord. Stay curious and stay skeptical.
Good luck out there.